Good day. Today is Thursday, May 26th. This is the Kubernetes community meetup. It is recorded, and we do this every week. Today's agenda is actually pretty full. It's very exciting. And we are going to have Matt Butcher talking about Helm this morning. And then after that demonstration, we will also have Gabe Monroy from Deis talk about why they want to contribute to Kubernetes, what they see as the value to them as a small startup in contributing to Kubernetes. Then we have a conversation about the workflow feature set and a particular pull request, which is 24781, as well as a slightly longer discussion about formalizing the criteria for inclusion in the core Kubernetes API with workflow potentially as a specific example on that. Then we have an update on some merge queue optimizations with Daniel Smith, who I have not actually heard a check-in from, but I will get that in a moment. And then as a last reminder now and at the end of the meeting, next week's meeting is going to be at 5 p.m. Pacific time, trying an Asia-friendly time or a some of Asia-friendly time in order to see if we can get some more overlap from that community. It'll be the second time we try it. We'll see how it goes. We had a low attendance last time, but tell all your friends who might be find that more convenient time to join us. All right, so Matt, I think I heard you. So let's go ahead and get started with the Helm demo if you're ready. Maybe I didn't hear Matt.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay,
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
The infamous mute problem. Yeah. So my name is Matt Butcher. I'm an architect at Deis. I'm on the team of core contributors that works on Kubernetes Helm. And we are currently in the middle of building the Helm V2 release. Really excited about what's going on. So Helm, if you haven't heard of it, is a tool for deploying and managing Kubernetes charts. And a chart is basically like a bundle of sort of prefabbed resources, Kubernetes resource files and manifests with template support and things like that. So the idea is that we wanted to build something that made it as easy to install new stuff into Kubernetes as it is to say like apt-get install nginx or yum install WordPress or something like that. Or the original inspiration for this was really Homebrew. So Helm Classic, the 1.x branch of Helm, was strongly modeled after Homebrew. With this new release, we've had, gotten together with Bitnami, with Google, with several other orgs, and tried to build something that was a little more powerful and a little more attuned to teamwork, right? So Helm Classic was entirely client-oriented, like Homebrew. But what we found was, say you and I are both deploying something, right? So we're working together on it. I do a Helm install of something, and then I take off for the weekend and take my laptop with me, right? The Helm Classic story was, well, now you're kind of in trouble because I was the source on that one. So we built a server, an in-cluster component this time around. So I install something, I take off for the weekend. You can log into Kubernetes and see what I deployed and how I deployed it, grab my config, tweak it, push it back in. And then when I come back, I can see the changes you made and teams can collaborate more effectively. We also like the idea of having an in-cluster part because that means that as we continue developing Helm, we can add more and more features that'll make managing sorts of things more automatic, right? Automate a lot of these things because the cluster can be, the Helm in-cluster piece can be watching the state of the cluster and reacting accordingly. So we're really excited about this new direction. It's taken us a little longer than we had hoped to get it really off the ground, but now it is. As of yesterday, we got a developer preview release out, tagged Alpha 1, and we're really excited about the way it's going. From here on out, we expect the velocity will pick up, and so we'll be cutting an Alpha 2 fairly shortly. Right now, you still have to build from source. So if you wanted to go kick the tires on Helm V2, you head over to github/kubernetes/helm, download the repo and run, make bootstrap build, and it'll try and bootstrap your local environment and then build all the binaries you need. So what I'm gonna do today is take kind of a quick walkthrough of some of the core features of the new Helm. I'm running not only off of master, but off of fixed branch because I was fixing something this morning and I didn't have time to switch everything back and get it configured. So I'm living on the edge. We'll see how it goes on a fixed branch on an alpha release. All right, let me share my screen here.
Living dangerously.
All right, that's right. Yeah. So can you guys see the screen here? Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. All right. And it's relatively readable, I assume. Okay. So to start out with Helm, you really want to just get the local and the remote environment set up all at once, okay? So normally this is just, you simply type Helm init, and what Helm init is gonna do is it's gonna install and configure your local environment, and then it's also gonna attempt to go out, grab the latest stable image, install that into your Kubernetes cluster according to whatever you've already pre-configured kubectl to point to, okay? Like I said, we're on alpha, I'm running on the edge, so we're running off of, Adam Reese is one of our core contributors. I'm running off of his image because it's hopefully more stable than my last image, but here we go. So it has now configured my Helm home. I point mine to a separate place. By default, it should go in users, $user/.helm, I think is where it goes by default. I've got mine overridden, so you can see it's going into my Helm_home directory. That's like my local cache where stuff goes just to keep it cached, where my local config files go, stuff like that. Now the server side component of Helm is called Tiller. Tiller is the connection point between the helm of a boat and the rudder in the back. I guess that's where the rudder is. I'm not really a naval guy. But so Tiller is the thing that helps us steer this ship. Tiller's running server side. So if I do a get pods, the default namespace is Helm, inspiring as it is there. So there we go. I can see that I'm running a Tiller pod somewhere in there. That's the server side component, okay? So it looks like we're up and running. So we're going to continue living dangerously by installing something. So I've got a local Alpine chart here. Helm can install out of two different places. We'll get to the second one, the repository-oriented stuff, a little bit later in this demo. But for developers, it's really useful to be able to say, hey, I'm working in this directory. Can you install a chart here? And that's what I'm doing here. So if I run a Helm install here, it's going to look in my docs examples Alpine directory. It's just a little simple chart that installs an Alpine Linux pod that's like sleeping for 9,000 seconds or something like that. So, thanks. So when I install it, it takes my chart, it pushes it up to Tiller. Tiller runs a release and generates a name for me. I can override the name and give it my own if I want to, but I let it generate one for me. So a release is like an instance of the chart. It's a running instance of the chart. So it generated an Alpine one, and it named it Singing Angelfish. So if I go, actually, let me just list it. So I'll list and see what I've got running in there. I've got Singing Angelfish running in there. I've got a little extra debugging info there, so you can ignore that top part. But you can see there the name Singing Angelfish. It's running the Alpine 0.1 chart. It was created just a few moments ago. So now if I run a Kubernetes command, I should see that resource running in there, right? So let's just look at all of them there. So I can still see my Tiller RC pod running there. I can also see my new Singing Angelfish Alpine pod in there and running. So the idea here is that Tiller is going to handle that, taking the manifest, taking the user supplied values, merging the template and the values, and then uploading the manifest into Kubernetes, and then Kubernetes takes care of all the rest of the stuff. So this means you can use any of the regular Kubernetes types. Depending on how you compile it, you've got all kinds of additional extensions enabled for you. But basically, we're using the Kubernetes library to do all of this. So all the Kubernetes types are supported out of the box. So we've got this pod, we've got it created, we've got an object that's a release object in Tiller. The release object is basically just tracking the stuff that we deployed out into Kubernetes, and tracking is sort of a loose term, right? We're trying to use as much of Kubernetes as possible and not try and duplicate state tracking or anything like that. All right, so we've released something in there. I can check on Okay, so remember that scenario I talked about at the beginning? I take off for the weekend. It's your responsibility now to go find out how I configured singing angelfish, right? So you want to just take a quick glance at, say, what the manifest file was that I used when I created this release, right? So you can say, hey, Helm, get the manifest for singing angelfish, was it? Yeah. And it'll dump the manifest back out. Or I can drop the manifest noun here and basically just try and dump as much of the info as it has, and it'll tell me what the chart was, when it was released, if I had passed any configs, which I hadn't, up to the server, and what the generated manifest looks like. So this is the way you can sort of share data very conveniently, and you can fetch this stuff back down and take care of it, you know, get work done the way you need to get it done. Okay, so let's just delete that one out of there too. Now if I go back and run a Helm list, I see that that's still there. Well, why is that still there? Because when we delete stuff, and we'll probably add some filters on this so that you don't have a bazillion deleted things, but we want to track inside of Tiller when something is deleted. We don't want to just simply have it go away, because I might delete it. You might say, hey, we were using that. And so you might want to roll it back and say, all right, what was the one? Oh, it was singing angelfish. Let's roll that back to the last release. The rollback stuff is not done, but that's what we're working on. This is the kind of stuff we're planning on for the future. But the idea is we want to track some very minimal state inside of Tiller so that when something gets deleted, we can see that it was deleted. Because if we go look at the pods, we're not going to see in there the deleted pods, right? So we'll probably add some flags and a little bit of sugar around it so it's easier for you to say, I want to see deleted or I don't want to see deleted, but that's sort of the basic idea. All right, so
in 2 minutes?
Okay, the last part I wanted to talk about real quick is we learned some lessons about repositories. What we wanted to do was make it really simple for people to build their own chart repositories, okay? We realized that in Helm Classic, we were entirely GitHub centric. We weren't terribly happy with the way that worked out. So we've added some much easier way to work with repos. A repo now is just kind of any HTTP server that deals with packaged charts. So I think I've got one repo set up there now. I can easily add another one. So if you take a look at the URL that I'm about to add, you'll see that that's just the Google GCS storage. It's turned on in website mode so we can grab charts. And now we can basically go and search and see what, let's try Helm search. And that's searching for charts with E in the chart name. And you can see I've got some from the kube charts repo that I just added. The local charts are basically the ones I'm working on locally. And then the other thing we wanted to streamline was making it easy to create new charts. So, you know, if I type in Helm create my chart, now I've got my chart stubbed out. When I'm ready to release it, I can basically do Helm package my chart, and it'll build me a little tarball of the, there you go. So basically what we're doing now is we've got three big parts. Here's sort of the summary, right? We've got the command line, Helm utility, which communicates with the server over gRPC. We've got the server side component, which is Tiller, whose job is basically to take packages, deploy them into Kubernetes and manage them. And then we've got this third concept, which is really the repository where you can take charts, put those charts up there, either make them public for other people or run one inside of your org so that you can build org-wide charts or just use them for personal development. So we're really excited. Hit Alpha 1 yesterday. We're plowing on toward Alpha 2, which will start on some of the stuff like the upgrade path, stabilization, and finishing up some of the big outstanding features. All right, well, that's what I got. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Matt. How can people reach you or reach the Helm community, and how can they help working on this?
Yeah, so so I can give you several places to reach us really easily. We've got the Helm Slack channel and the Kubernetes server. We're all very active in there. We try and post our daily stand-ups in there on Thursdays. In fact, right before this meeting, we actually do a Zoom-based stand-up that anybody is invited to. You can come in and find out what's going on. The link to that is, I think, on our GitHub page and also in the Kubernetes Slack channel. The issue queue is relatively active. That's a great place to jump in. You know, show up to any of those places. We're also very active in SIG apps, because SIG apps is kind of the place where a lot of us who are interested in deploying and running things in Kubernetes hang out. So that's another great place to contact us. I'm probably
Fantastic.
forgetting something else, but I think that's good. So,
There are options, and you can always add them to the notes document as well if you think of other places.
okay. All right.
Thanks much. I'm going to jump right on and not take questions this time because we're running a little tiny bit behind. So, Gabe, you were going to tell us why Deis has, spent so much time and effort working on Helm and with the Kubernetes project.
Sure, yeah. Thanks to share a little bit about this. So the Deis team's actually been helping customers with container tech since about August of 2013, and given we started pretty early, we started to hit the limits of some of the early container schedulers, quite early on, and experienced some real pain from customers, and really derived the need for something more robust. And that actually led to a pretty thorough evaluation of Docker Swarm, Mesos, and Kubernetes, albeit quite a few months back. We actually took our time and integrated each different orchestrator into sort of our PaaS project as a technology preview, so we could actually get real feedback from our community, and not just like make it our opinions, but actually get opinions of other folks. And we also, as we started to learn some of those code bases, ended up sending patches upstream to fix things in each of those projects that we needed to fit our needs. And when the dust from that evaluation process settled, it was really Kubernetes that was left standing. So there's sort of a technical aspect to that, and kind of a non-technical. From a technical standpoint, there are really three things that stood out with Kubernetes. The first was the architectural foundation. If you take a look at the API design in Kubernetes, it's just incredibly well done. Things like kinds and versions, and the way that the CRUD semantics are implemented, it's all really extensible. You can kind of see that in the way the API extensions are managed. And then under the hood, Kubernetes is powered by these control loops that are pushing desired state. And defined by declarative APIs. These seem obvious to folks that are using Kubernetes today, but you don't find this stuff in a lot of the other projects that we were looking at. The second aspect was the thing that the ability to push loosely coupled infrastructure. Kubernetes uses these concepts of labels and label selectors, which is like sort of a query language. That allow it to model really complex systems that map really well to the type of environments that our customers are running. That they consist of many different types of objects, and many different versions, things like canary deployments, all kind of living in in the same cluster at the same time. So this ability to promote loose coupling was important. And lastly, on the technical side, was well-defined scope. Like all great software, the Kubernetes project really seems to value what it won't do as highly as what it does do. And you see that in terms of being guarded around what kind of primitives do end up getting introduced, and where it's appropriate to use composition rather than kind of building everything into the core. But just as important as those three technical aspects is what I consider the long-term prospects for the project. And I definitely think that the Google roots obviously helped a lot in terms of laying a strong technical foundation, but I think a bigger issue is the strength of the community. To me, that says a lot more about the future of any open source project. And if you look around, you might have noticed Kubernetes has a really extremely diverse group of users and contributors, and also vendors like ourselves. Lots of opinions floating around, lots of interest in starting up new SIGs and attending existing SIGs, and just generally helping push the project forward. And there's always, of course, room for improvement in terms of community management and that sort of thing. But I will say that the level of energy and diversity embodied by the Kubernetes community is unique in the space. That's something that we know firsthand. So we're happy to be part of it, and we look forward to contributing more in the future.
Yeah. Thanks for your summary, Gabe. That's fantastic to hear the what contributed to the choice and what you guys want to get out of it as well. I got a reminder that we are, of course, in the run-up to 1.3. So before we jump into workflow and APIs, I asked for a super quick update on where we are against 1.3. So Brian Grant is going to give us an update there. There are 3 times weekly Burndown meetings as well. So if somebody wants to participate in and engage in those, please let me know as well. So Brian, a quick update.
Yeah, I'll just second what Sarah said about attending the Burndown meetings. They're definitely open, and everybody who has a stake in 1.3 is encouraged to come and help us close out the release on time. We are trying to stick to the timeline that's documented on the Release 1.3 wiki page in the repo. We did have our feature complete date on Monday, and the not everything got in, and we're all bummed by that. But like I said, we are trying to stick to the release date this time. So we've shifted gears, and people are focused primarily now on fixing bugs. So we are now automatically opening GitHub issues for test failures. You can find those test failures by searching for the kind flake label in GitHub on the repo. Any unassigned issue is fair game, or if you just want to help us deduplicate open issues, that would also be super useful. But all of the test results should be accessible publicly. Occasionally we have problems with that. If you do encounter a problem, definitely let us know. But you should be able to go get the logs from the running tests and debug an issue and send a PR for a fix. We have over 100 open failure issues right now, and we're trying to get those all assigned to people and pound them down. So there's a bunch of chatter about the Burndown Meetings. If you can post a link to the Hangout or the Zoom. I don't even actually remember. I think it was a Hangout.
I think it's Hangout. I can do that in a moment. But we are.
So anyway, that was about it. We are converging. We will. If you have any issues assigned to the 1.3 milestone, please make sure they're still tracking for 1.3.
Thanks, Brian. And given that we are running as close on time and we are still as early in this burn down as we are, I'm going to jump right on and say, if you've got questions or concerns about that, please send them to Kubernetes Dev. We can have a discussion there. But Brendan appears to be live broadcasting from outside, and we are going to move on to a conversation about workflow and inclusion of inclusion standards for core APIs. Brendan and Eric Toon and Dario, I believe, are talking about these. And if you guys can keep this to 25 minutes plus or minus 5, that would be awesome, because we've still got more excitement in today's meeting.
Yeah, I think that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I moved outside so that it's slightly quieter. I'm actually at GlueCon talking. So
you are live broadcasting from GlueCon.
I'm live broadcasting from GlueCon, yeah, yes. And you all missed my talk. Why didn't you come to my talk? I think we can keep this to a lot shorter than 20 minutes, hopefully.
Fantastic.
I guess I put it on the community, I guess, if there's lots of questions. So I don't know, is Eric there as well, or is Dario?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so this genesis for this discussion came up a while ago in the context of workflow, and Gabe kind of alluded to this actually in his little spiel about the choices of Kubernetes, and I think that we've sort of talked about it on and off for a while about the limits, and we've made some decisions along the way. I mean, we've sort of explicitly said that config is outside of the limits, and on the other side, we've sort of explicitly said that machine management is outside the limits, right? Like we've made decisions about not representing, we'll represent nodes, but we're probably never going to represent machines in the API, and deal with sort of machine health management and maintenance. I thought it was important to have a conversation and get some things that are a little bit more, both a conversation in the community and also just get some things written down so there's better guidelines about how and when and we decide to include APIs into the core, right? Partially because I think we're on the path towards the ability to have extensible APIs added from the outside, and also because I think that we're just finishing up a lot of the stuff that we think is core, and so we need to start slowing down the rate at which we introduce new ideas and new APIs and Kubernetes. specifically around workflow, we had merged this proposal that said that we were going to add workflow, and I think after some discussion with Dario and Eric and other people, we've made a decision to actually do this on the outside and do this via third party, because and I will use that as context for sort of the general guidelines that I think we're moving towards, and so let me pull up my little notes. I think that I guess part of this is the motivation that we're never intended Kubernetes to be the end-all be-all system, right? I mean, you can see this with OpenShift living on top, right? OpenShift provides things like image build and source to deployment that we're just never going to do, right? It's not part of our scope. It's not part of our charter. And then also, I think we see the pain of, as the project gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the pain of maintaining it and the pain of handling all the inflow of code and the pain for developers of having the code, having to land the code with us, right? Having to sort of effectively lose ownership of their code when they land it with us is tricky. And so we'd rather not have some of that pain. So concretely, I think that what we're moving towards, and I'm going to put this into a PR, but this is sort of the initial stage of the discussion. We're moving towards effectively raising the bar for API inclusion into core. And the basic criteria that I think we're trying to come up with is that and I sort of use the workflow and scheduled job, or we have sort of used the workflow and scheduled job as a nice example of this distinction. We want to have a single generally accepted solution. And so we think that, cron is a single generally accepted solution. There really isn't a lot of effort by people to rebuild different versions of cron. There's no language wars around the cron spec time format. There's not a lot of conflict there. It's a well understood spec. And that's sort of criteria one, is that there's a single generally accepted solution. The second criteria is that the object is expected to be generally useful. I put in 50% of the community as kind of a placeholder. We could maybe argue about what we actually want the number to be, but I think we only want things because adding things to core requires documentation, requires conceptual overload for people. We only want to add things to the core that we think are generally useful to a lot of people. And finally, I think that this is maybe the squishiest criteria, that there is general acceptance that the object is at the Kubernetes layer. And so I don't exactly know what general acceptance means. I think we all kind of have a feeling for, and Brian has written this "What is Kubernetes" doc that's actually out there on the web already. I think that gives a definition of what we're trying to provide here. And I think over time, that definition may change, and that's okay. Things evolve as new things become apparent. But I think we need to have a general acceptance that, that this feels right? The philosophy of what we're trying to provide, this object feels right in that context. So those are sort of the criteria. And then we wanted to lay out some exceptions, because of course, when you lay out criteria, you don't want to block people from doing things. And the two exceptions that we want to lay out is that there's no other way to implement this functionality in Kubernetes. And I'm not actually sure there are any examples of this anymore. But at times there have been API objects that you just simply couldn't implement outside of Kubernetes. And then the other one is exceptional circumstances as judged by committers. And this is really intended to be kind of the escape clause, where I don't want us to back into a corner. And there was a great deal of concern from other people about effectively, writing down a series of hard and fast rules and then looking silly or hypocritical because, it became readily apparent that, we actually really needed to add some new API object that didn't match up to those rules. I think maybe PetSet might be an example of this, in the sense that I'm not actually sure there is a single generally accepted solution for PetSet, right? We're kind of breaking new ground there. But as committers and as maintainers, we believe that it's an important object to add to Kubernetes. So that's about it, I guess.
So Brendan, we also talked about, because since there was considerable discussion, I know, inside Google about this, you sort of framed this out as all the different things you wanted. We wanted to bring that conversation out here without dominating the discussion. Did you guys come up with, because I think David Oppenheimer and Eric Toon were also going to present slightly different variations. Is that still the plan, as I put you all on the spot?
I have no idea, actually. There was no
No,
coordination before we did this.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I mean, my concern, just to be completely transparent, was about having an exception, because I think that when you put down these very concrete rules, like the first few that Brendan mentioned, you do open yourself up to backing yourself into a corner that wouldn't be good for the community and wouldn't be good for the project and wouldn't be good for the users, who I think really should be our first priority, because if we don't have users, then we won't have a community, because there won't be anyone to build stuff for. And so I think by having, I think these guidelines are great, and I think by having a little bit of flexibility and being able to use judgment in applying them, it addresses the concern I had about being overly restrictive.
Fantastic. And is David on, and did he have any concerns that he wanted to air?
That was David.
Sorry,
Oh,
that
sorry.
was David.
My apologies, David. Voice is sometimes two-dimensional. I don't remember. Anyway.
It's fine.
Okay, then did Eric have any counterpoints? Apparently not. Okay, so my goal in this conversation was to remind everybody to have more of these conversations transparently and bring them out into the community, so that we don't, we as Googlers sometimes forget internally, have the conversations and then present a unified view, which then seems as if it's coming down by fiat. And I wanted us to start having more of those in public without necessarily having it dominated by 10 Googlers all arguing. So we tried to come up with a way to have that conversation, and then also bring the opportunity out for you, the rest of the community, and the users, if we have users on here, to talk about this as ways that people are engaging with Kubernetes and bringing things in. And it looks like Clayton has been writing notes as we go. Do you want to just talk through those, Clayton?
He's being a smart aleck.
Some of them, yes, but some of them actually seemed like they might be like real references.
Yeah, and I think I pretty much agree with everything that Brendan said, just because from the perspective of, like, from the OpenShift side, like from the very beginning, we've basically wanted to add lots and lots and lots of concepts that sit around Kubernetes. But practically speaking, to try to do all that in Kubernetes would be madness, like not just this is Sparta madness, but real development gridlock, where all of the criteria that Brendan mentioned, I think, are things that I've personally felt as a good rules of thumb, which is it something that can be implemented in the core no other way? Is it something that everyone agrees on? And all of those exceptions are also great examples of use cases. And for us, like, I think the thing that we've been trying to get to over the last year is actually getting to the point where someone could build extensions around Kubernetes and have it work. All of the hard work that's been done on third-party resources and API extensions and security and auth, like this whole class of problems that are really hard to get right. We're not quite there yet, but we're starting to get to the point where we can actually see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think it is, we're already starting to see people try and use this in ways that is actually demonstrating that this is the right approach.
So
yeah, and I would say actually that in the spirit of community discussion, the thing that was struck that caused the greatest amount of discussion and angst and pain was effectively what happens when third-party resources are really ready, finally and fully ready. And so I think that we're not going to have that discussion now, and I don't want to have that discussion now. But I think over the next few months, and the next 6 months, maybe we're going to be in a place where where third-party resources really are a very strong, viable option without any caveats, and everything else that's going on, we should start having those conversations. So start thinking about what it means, to get to a place where third party is a fully viable way to add APIs, and how that might affect the criteria that we're establishing here.
And I think the one other note is that the support that we would need to have a viable set of tools that aren't just the core Kubernetes, but the things built around it that people can find and use, the work with Helm, the work that people have been doing on the build system, the submit queue, like these are all things that healthy, viable projects need to have healthy, viable ecosystems. And, we're going to have to keep committing to improving those.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an important point. Sorry.
Awesome. Okay, so we also had workflow. We touched on it for a moment. Is there a specific action item out of this where we need to make a decision, or is Dario's work continuing on?
Yeah, that's all sorted out. I think that was just a
Fantastic. An example.
I mentioned it. I sort of mentioned it in passing at the very end of community meeting, as everyone was hanging up. It was just sort of like, let's circle back and cross T's, dot I's, and I think we've done that. Unless Dario has a.
No, I was just saying that I'm probably going to develop it and submit a pull request in the Kubernetes contrib as an example. But today, third-party resource not behave exactly
not quite
in the right way, so probably we need more time on this. This is a pity because we plan to use in production soon. We have a lot of workflow today in our, not on Kubernetes, but in our data center. We have thousands of workflow that run every day. And the plan was not to bring everything on OpenShift because we use OpenShift in production, but to start to at least to test. We have to wait. That's the reality. That's the way it is. Yeah. It's part of the business. Okay, that's all.
I think it's also a good forcing function, hopefully, to force us to finish the stuff that the hard stuff that's necessary to make third party real.
And as we get third-party more real, we have to determine what we are going to do with contrib and how we are going to make it more maintainable, stable, etc.
Yeah, and I think that's a great.
No, anyway, my plan is to implement at least the proposal that will be removed. Probably we're going to remove from the documentation. But anyway, we definitely at the beginning, I mentioned here and there in the GitHub that we need more than the workflow proposal. We need a scheduled workflow, because this is what we have in production. And the idea was to start with a step with scheduled job, then workflow and having scheduled workflow. But we understand the point that Brendan just raised, the fact that Kubernetes cannot be probably the solution that is going to take everything. So
to everything, right?
I have a question, Dario. You're running workflows in production to orchestrate the workflows?
Sorry, Dario, I muted you. Could you say that again?
Brian's question was not easily audible. Maybe he can repeat it.
Yeah.
You mentioned you are running workflows in production now, many workflows. What mechanism are you using to orchestrate those workflows today?
We have a proprietary tool. Please, many apologize. I'm not sure I can unveil this. We have a solution that has been...
A solution you developed yourself, okay.
No. It's a tool that we bought externally.
I see.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to bookmark the conversation on contrib because I think we need, so people who are interested in that, please reach out to me because I think we need to come up with a scope of what the real problem is today and what we want to do with it going forward. So that's an important one for us in the upcoming. If we have no other questions on APIs or discussion on the APIs or workflow, then let's go on to the next item. So last call for discussion on APIs. Nope. Okay, workflow I presume is fine. So let's go talk about merge queue optimizations, because Daniel Smith, also known as Lava Lamp in all of the land of GitHub, has been working really hard on making the submit queue better and getting us toward a world where tests and flakes are more sane.
Thanks, Sarah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I can talk about a lot of stuff here, but first of all, I've put some optimizations in the submit queue, and it has been going a little faster. The basic optimizations are how it retests PRs when they get to the top of the queue. In some circumstances, it used to test them twice, like if the test set had broke and then started passing again. So now it doesn't do that anymore. And additionally, I made it more lenient when individual tests flaked at head. It will now consider that a flake instead of being broken, and it will continue merging as long as the same the same test isn't breaking multiple times in a row. So that's two things that are already in. Other things that we've started doing is the merge queue now automatically files issues for tests that fail instead of the build cop having to do that. And this is great because it means that there's a consistent format for the issues, and you can look and you'll see comments. It files comments as they continue to flake, so you can tell which ones are happening more frequently and therefore are more important. And I'm continuing to improve that. So soon it will handle, it will find old issues, and soon it will know the difference between the entire suite broke and somebody needs to consider a group of failures together versus these are individual test flakes. But more generally, so that's specifically a few things that have happened to the submit queue. But more generally, as I'm sure you've noticed, we have a problem with throughput, merge throughput, even with those optimizations in place. We can probably get another doubling in throughput. And by the way, those optimizations I mentioned, they pretty much doubled throughput over the last weekend. And I think if we can fix individual flakes, we can probably get another doubling in throughput, and that's probably about the maximum that is possible with our current setup. To get faster than that, we need to consider a few things. We need to consider making the tests that it runs, because it runs every issue in serial. We need to consider making them much faster. Alternatively, we need to consider grouping up PRs and trying to test multiple PRs together. So we here at Google we've noticed that this is a problem, and we've drafted a few people to focus on creating, because this is like the fourth time this project has had a major test flake emergency. So we've drafted a few people. We're writing up some goals and exit criteria. We want to produce a system that keeps tests fixed, because we have two things that we need to get two things working. We need velocity. We need people to be able to get changes into the project, and we also need stability. We need the test to continue to working because we want to deliver a quality piece of software. I will be publishing some goals to Kubernetes dev. We'll be soliciting help for some items. You've already seen Eric's soliciting you for owning tests individually. So this is one of the things that we want to do to improve the situation is to get people to sign up to own an individual test. And that's a good way to get on board the project anyway. You can demonstrate like ownership, etc. Make us very happy and
but code testing or fixing test flakes is a great bribe.
Yes. Yes, it is. So let's see. Was there anything else I want? Oh, so I have developed I have a 30 or 35 items here that I want to get fixed, and a draft of our goals, and I'll probably share those both with Kubernetes dev mailing list when they've been cleaned up a little bit. And yeah, any questions?
Any volunteers to help would be another one.
Yeah, I don't have owners for everything that I want done yet. So when I publish this, I'll gladly take. Some of them are relatively easy. So there's just a lot of stuff to do.
Okay. No feedback, or is all the feedback happening in chat? It seems like a lot's happening in chat.
I'm not watching chat.
I guess my only feedback is to just say thank you.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
This is not entirely altruistic. Like my own stuff is blocked because the submit queue is impossible to get through. So, and I want to do a bunch of big refactoring.
Yeah, we were. I wasn't kidding this morning when I sent the email saying this is a great way to get onboarded, and you will get lots of help and attention from people who are already contributors or already maintainers because they want this fixed. So you submit something in that looks like it's a test fix, or work on something testing related. There's going to be a lot of attention and help and review work that happens against those things because this is a huge push. And also work toward making this never happen again. And I know we talked about that at the end of 1.2, but we are here now. And so thank you to Daniel for all the work on this.
I can give you a quick build cop summary if you like. We have
Fantastic, yes.
60 PRs on the queue. Something is making unit tests take 60 minutes to run rather than the end-to-end tests, which are at 40. So the throughput is down to around 24 a day max if nothing breaks head.
Yes, I already assigned someone to look at why are our unit tests so long. We need to fix that immediately.
And so I'm going through and trying to be expedient about these manual merges and such, but it's hard for me to go and read every single PR in detail and determine how safe and whatnot it is. It's also tricky to see which PRs are like fixing bugs versus adding features versus fixing test flakes. And so if you want to make that a little more explicit on your PRs, if you have candidates that are test flake fixes or bug fixes, call those out, please.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that's worth mentioning is, so I have a spreadsheet. I've been tracking the causes of merge queue outage, and most of them are caused by manual merges. So
the more close we can get to never doing those.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. Does anyone else? Remarkably, I thought we had a fully stuffed agenda, and we're going to run right up to the last minute. But remarkably, we have about 10 minutes. So is there any special interest group that did things this last week? Did you all take the last couple of days quietly after getting everything in for 1.3? Anybody want to give updates or ask questions? Otherwise, we get 10 minutes of our life back.
I'd like to find out what's going on with PetSet.
Ah, okay. Thanks, Mike. Is there somebody here who can talk a little bit about PetSet? Okay, either there's nobody here who can talk a little bit about PetSet today, or I lost my connection.
I think this is really kind of what I was asking for earlier when I was suggesting we have a 1.3 release update.
Okay.
Not really clear given the current state without actually showing up to the Burndown meetings, or I actually noticed you called it a turndown meeting earlier.
That's autocorrect. That's not.
I thought that was actually quite the great way to probably be thinking about those meetings anyway. But I think maybe for next time if we're really prepared for today, but I mean there's a number of features on the list that it would be good to get.
One of the things
product management like summary of where we stand on these things, including pet sets.
One of the things we've talked about is actually sending out a weekly or twice a week or something status to Kubernetes dev about the key 1.3 features, about their status. I think that might be the best solution to this. I don't think that idea went anywhere, but it might be more scalable than trying to get around the room status report on N for a very large value of N features in the community meeting. I am happy to try to organize that if other people don't have time.
David, I think that TJ was sending those out every 2 weeks leading up to this, but I think to Bob's point, more often right now, or at least these made it in, these made it out, but we have this list of bugs. Would be helpful.
Yeah. Like I agree, but I'm just saying, like I think that information is very important for the community. But I think the right way to disseminate it is through the mailing list, rather than like everyone has to synchronize in the same time and space, and then bore each other with status.
I'm going to propose something alternative. And by the way, I'm also happy to help. I've actually been spending a fair bit of time trying to gather the current state of PetSet along this line. And the issue is that if you're going to come to, you should be able to come to the Kubernetes 1.3 release page, see and find a link to kind of what the current description of, say, pet set is, have a set of links that take you into what the PRs are so that you can figure out what's going on. And I believe it's, I want to say it's 260 is currently the pet set PR. I mean, to try to understand what, I mean, that's gotten to be a really long, that's a long read to figure out what's going on. So it's very hard to figure out for even for folks like us who've been pretty involved in the project to dig through all of these things and figure out kind of where things stand at any given moment. I'd really want to see this done by way of updates to the wiki. Or in some other like documentation, current state documentation needs to be updated. Otherwise, to figure things out, people are going back through email archives and trying to piece the puzzle back together again.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like there's two separable issues here. One is for very complicated issues, having a good summary of what is actually being implemented, which it sounds like you're saying lacking for pet set. And then the other is like, you know, what remains to be implemented or be fixed before the release. It sounds almost like you're more concerned about the first. And I think you're not the first person to express that specific concern about pet set, given the length of the issue.
Not just pet set.
Yes.
Every feature, all features in 1.3. I encourage everyone.
Extension next in 1.4.
Someone just posted the links, right? Go look at the release 1.3 page and try to figure out what 1.3 on that page. It's just not at all possible.
So one of the things that I've been bandying about with people and am going to start reaching out more broadly with is the idea that we have a project management, technical project management group out of the community. So not just the Google PMs, not just the Google TPMs. We've gotten Mike Saparov from CoreOS and we have Andy Goldstein from Red Hat, but we're not doing this and Clayton is a lead from Red Hat. We're not doing this in a cohesive and thoughtful way, but in the 1.4 timeline, bringing together a group which is accountable to one another to give this back to the community, as opposed to only being accountable to your own devs or occasionally being asked to come forward to the community meeting, that kind of thing. Is that something you have people that you would be willing to help us staff with? Is there someone from your team that has already sort of been doing this? It sounds like you have for some value of time that can help us put this forward, Bob.
Yeah, I think in some ways what I'm proposing here is that we need something like a product manager-ish role. Maybe I'll call it a feature owner, and the feature owner should really be able to keep that updated and is kind of a identifiable person that anyone can go and ask. And I'm available to do some of that work. We have other people on the team who could do that kind of work. I think that's some, I'll say, additional support to the project by way of product management, feature owner kinds of contribution. I think we should, I think would be well worthwhile for everyone, and we are certainly willing to jump in and help on that. But I think it needs to be, I'll say, a more official role and not done informally, because otherwise it's just too hard to get status and get attention from the development teams that will give you the information you need in order to make that really an effective job.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm trying to do, is pull together a community group that does this product or technical project management, and then maybe delegate some pieces to feature leads. Maybe they are feature leads in some case, or not feature leads, but feature owners in the product sense.
We'd be happy to be involved in a trial of doing something like
that. Okay.
Yeah, we also created the feature repo with a template that could use more work, but we'd like to try that in 1.4.
Yep.
So that's a better way of tracking the open tasks,
which will give us summary information better as well.
Repo that more people can have write access to, and that has less noise in it compared to the main repo to make things easier to find.
Yeah, so I think these will all help us in the going forward if we can collect around it and make it the way we do this, at least while we iterate against whatever the next way is, because we find some ways to improve. And then, so yes, I will start reaching out to people to form a group of product and feature owners toward 1.4, but there's still the pain point of 1.3.
Yeah. And Sarah, this is Aparna. I was pinging you as well.
Aparna is one of our new product managers for Kubernetes at Google. So Aparna and I were talking about this.
Yes, and of course I would love to be involved in the PM group for 1.4, and I have some thoughts there. But also I understand the 1.3 need, and I think, I think I will assist in putting something together for a summary.
That's awesome. Thank you, Aparna.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, this is Mike. So I compiled the original spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet, right? I know it's not the ideal form, but as much as kind of for now, I'm just reaching to SIG leads if they can keep the list updated, so at least we can track what went into 1.3 and what's going to spill over to 1.4. I think it's a good point. And then I'll also kind of try to work from the feature templates that Brian mentioned to build similar spreadsheet for now for 1.4. If anyone has a better idea what project management tool to use instead of spreadsheets, I'm all open, but for now I'll keep using Google Spreadsheets, easier to share.
All right, we have 4 minutes and we have a grand vision going forward. We have, Aparna has volunteered to do some cleanup on the 1.3 to get better status out. Aparna, are you game to give some summary feature updates next week on this meeting? It is at 5 o'clock. This is where I get my notice, and 5 p.m. next Thursday instead of regularly at 10 a.m. because we're trying to see if we can engage our Asian counterparts a bit more.
I think I can help prepare the summary, and maybe TJ can give the update, because at 5 p.m. I will be at MesosCon, or actually I will be in a flight at 5 p.m.
There you go. Okay, well, we will find someone, but thank you for helping prepare it. All right, anyone else? Okay, we get 3 minutes of our lives back. Happy Thursday. I hope you all have a grand week, and that our submit queue woes, that our submit queue throughput increases and continues to get better with all of the merge queue work. So thank you all, and we will talk next week, 5 p.m. Don't forget.